Good morning, and great morning to all of you listeners. Guys, welcome to Exit Strategies radio show. My name is Corwin J. Millett. I'm the broker owner of Exit Realty Low Country Group in beautiful North Charleston, South Carolina. If you've been tuning in for a while, y'all know what we say here. We tell you what our mission is, which is very simple. That is to empower our community through financial literacy and real estate education. Guys, we are legacy building. That is what we do. Brief shout out to everybody who has been tuning in, who's been watching our YouTube channel. Our channel there has been soaring with views. For those of you who've been listening to our podcast, either directly on our website, exitstrategiesradioshow.com, or any other of the countless podcast platforms that are available around the country and around the world. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. For our loyal listeners right here in the Charleston market in South Carolina that tune into us faithfully on WJNI, you know what we say, I love you. And I'm going to continue to say that because I do. We have been doing it. I am super excited and I'm super proud of where we've been taking the show and the information and the caliber of guests that we have been bringing in. And today is no different. We're going to roll out the platinum and red carpet because we got to have both. We got to make sure we got them fully covered. And I'm going to introduce to you, and we're going to have a real conversation and a good time. For our listeners, grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, because you're going to need to take some notes on this one, because this one is going to be live. This is a dream come true. We have none other than Dan Habercost, the CEO of Front Range Land. Dan, how are you doing today?
Corwin, I'm great. I love the energy, love the introduction, and I appreciate you having me here.
I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Now, you have a heck of a resume. I want you to give our listeners, if you don't mind, a brief snippet introduction of who you are, where you came from. I want you to make sure you sprinkle in there when you started, because that is impressive and amazing to me. And let's talk about what your company does and the insight and assistance that you can provide people.
Sure. So quick background on me. I'm originally from Ohio. I live in Colorado, but grew up in rural Ohio. I joke that I grew up in a cornfield. It's not really a joke. I pretty much did. And I started working pretty early. Everyone in my family worked. Nobody really had money. No business owners in the family. By the time I was 16, referencing what you said, I was managing a portfolio of rentals along with a farm for my boss at the time. And he'd spend a good portion of the year in Aruba, and I'd be handling things back home. So he definitely got a good deal there. Did that in high school, along with school, and that taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about the real estate I did not want to own. Then in college, worked full time, and I saw my older siblings go to school and accrue a lot of debt. And so I said, I'm not doing that. I don't care what I have to do. I was working full time through college and running a landscaping company. Around 20-ish years old, I was frustrated. I watched friends of mine have a lot of fun in high school, have fun in college, and I definitely did not. I worked. But I was managing 15 plus guys and doing that along with school full time. So I thought, okay, worst case, I graduate, I take this experience and I apply it to some sort of business to get a little bit ahead as an adult. And so I started reading about investing, stocks, different businesses you could start. And like just about everyone else, it was when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was just a light bulb moment. Like, I got it. Yeah. Then I bought a duplex while I was in college. I was 21 and it was a house hack. But it was around that time too, I was also realizing I don't want to stay here. Long story behind that, but ended up moving to Colorado Springs. Love the sun, love the outdoors. A lot of the same desirable characteristics as the Carolinas down by you, and bought another house hack. And that was great. I'm 22 and own 2 properties, but the low and no money down stuff is useful for maybe building an active business and a lot of strategies, but for the actual buy and hold, you need cash. Things go wrong. What was I going to do? How do I make a lot of money? How do I accelerate my income? Because I still had a job at the time. I met a local investor at a real estate group here, which I actually host now, who had been doing land and development for the last 40 years all over the country. And I would drive an hour south to meet him where he lived down in Pueblo West, for anyone who knows Colorado, and just help him in his business, learn from him, kind of just follow him around, but help him. He was building houses at the time, a lot of building houses. And so that's what got me into land. I would source lots for him and he'd sign them for $1,000 or he'd give me $500 just for the seller's information. Eventually, I started participating with him on the home builds too. And that's where Front Range Land ultimately came from. And quite simply, it's a big funnel going direct to seller for land all over the country now, most of which we just sell for cash or for terms, but then a few properties at a time, the very prime lots will put new construction homes on. So spec homes. That's Front Range Land. It's allowed me to continue buying properties slowly and steadily as well for the buy and hold. So I'm 27 now.
That's 11 years. I had to get my math right. So over 11-year time period, man, you have went from managing a portfolio of properties to running another business and getting back on the real estate side and starting to acquire and accumulate properties, and then kind of scrapping and saying, wait a minute, we're going to do this differently. We're going to get rid of the tenants and all the headaches that come with them. We're going to get down to the basis, which is the dirt, and we're going to move forward. Is that what I just heard?
Well, the only clarification there is the land and development is just a way for scaling the income. I am continually buying rentals, but my methodology there has grown in that I only want prime, easy, simple properties. I'd rather put my time into the active business and just buy nice real estate to hold.
Your strategy and your focus on the land piece is you essentially identify properties that are maybe ideal for development, for new construction home or multifamily or what have you, and then acquire that property or contract that property and then sell it off to someone who may be ready to do the development. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, the vast majority of the time, a couple at a time, I will do the vertical construction on, but mostly just flipping them. Yep.
That is awesome. Basically, I think you probably caught the fever and the bug, because I tell people, my great-grandfather was a carpenter. I used to follow him around as a kid. He also oversaw properties for people. He did property management for people. And what's interesting is not the same situation, but as he aged, he'd have gout. Had gout, and sometimes he'd have flare-ups and just couldn't go manage the properties, couldn't go collect rents and all that kind of stuff. And as a young kid, he would send me out to do it. So I would go collect rents from people. I started probably going to get rent sometime when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, kind of get a bug. Oh, wait a minute, how this work? When we got the bug, then we get some understanding. Now we're armed with knowledge and we're ready to go conquer or accomplish. So kudos to you. Let's talk about your strategies. Like when you look at this, one, why should people do it? That's the question. What is your strategy to get over into, okay, well, look, now I'm buying properties?
Do you want something more? I mean, more meaningful moments, opportunities, deeper relationships, and memorable experiences. Do you want to make a difference? If you said yes to any of that, a career in real estate could be the opportunity you're looking for. Guiding people through one of the most important decisions they ever make, the purchase or sale of their home, could be both rewarding and lucrative for you. Exit Realty's revolutionary compensation model, training, and technology provide you with the tools and resources you need to start and build your successful real estate career. Call Exit Realty Low Country Group today at 843-619-3005. That is 843-619-3005, or visit join.exitlowcountry.com and make your exit today.
Okay, so focusing specifically on land and development, let's niche down to that. The reason I like this space is it's just underappreciated. It's not nearly as competitive as, say, trying to go buy multifamily at a discount or single family. It's simple, it's much easier to do remotely, and there aren't a lot of big operators. It's a very inefficient space. That's reason number one as far as why land works so well. And then from there, you got to niche down because the umbrella of land is huge. There's farm and ranch, there's recreational land, there's infill, especially with the farm and ranch, you get into water rights, mineral rights, oil rights. There's a lot going on. And just like anything, if you try and do all of that at once, you can get yourself in trouble. Pick a niche. And for me, going back to the guy I learned from, he was building homes. And the significance of the lots that he was buying was that they were completely horizontally developed. And what that means is all the work was done to be able to, once you have your permit, just come in and start building. People misuse the word raw land all of the time. Just a vacant lot is not necessarily raw. Raw land, I don't touch raw land. I haven't done anything with it. That's a whole nother business, a whole nother strategy. All the lots that I focus on are infill. And the implication of that word means the entitlements and zoning are in place. Water, sewer, electric are in place, right? It's ready to go. There's streets. It's not just some cornfield that needs all of that upfront horizontal development. People don't get this a lot of time. To be clear, I'm going after horizontally developed infill lots. So think about, you go down a street in a developed city or subdivision and there's 5 houses and 3 vacant lots between. Those are the infill sorts of product that I go after. Okay, so that's number one. You don't necessarily have to do that yourself. It's just know what you are choosing and don't try and pursue huge farm and ranch acreage and infill rec and infill commercial lots, right? It's too many different strategies. That I would pick right from the beginning. What am I going to go after? From there, you got to build out your avatar. Who am I marketing to? And I see this done incorrectly all the time. People come from housing. A lot of times, if you're going to get a deal on single family, it's probably due to some sort of distress. And they try and take that and apply it to land. And I will tell you, especially down in the Southeast, down by you in North Carolina and Florida, I do a lot of business. And the people that sell at a discount are not distressed. They are wealthy and apathetic. For land specifically, and think about this, a lot of times they bought it 10, 20, 30 years ago. They bought it for cash because land is rarely financed. And so if they had cash that long ago, they're probably doing okay now. And more often it's that something got in the way where they didn't move there and build. They bought that that lot in Florida intending to build a house, and it never happened for whatever reason. So now it's just a sunk cost. And especially in the Southeast where prices have gone crazy, they bought it at 5 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar 20 years ago. And so they're at a place in life, at least the people who sell to us, that money isn't top priority. Their time is. And so if you make it simple and easy and right off the bat, you show that you're legitimate, they will sell to you at a discount. Our mailers, all of our marketing is based or focused on legitimacy and ease. Legitimacy being number one, because think about this. You're 60, 70 years old. You're getting all these calls, texts, and mailers about your lot in Florida. And who's the main target of scams? Well, it tends to be older people. They have an especially big barrier up where they're nervous. Is this legitimate? And so all of our marketing and processes are aligned accordingly. I'm ranting a little bit, but point being, you really need to identify your avatar for the type of land or for any asset if you're going to market direct to seller. Once that's built out, again, we align our mailers and cold calling accordingly. And from there, it's just a matter of getting good at the negotiating and making sure you build out your processes and checklists around due diligence so that you don't miss anything. Every market's different. There's subtleties and nuances from place to place as far as different parts of the country where norms are different. My North Carolina realtor gets non-refundable earnest money up front every time when he sells a lot for me. There's markets I'm in where that's never going to happen. We're just selling to mom and pops, and that's just not how the norms are there. So things just vary from place to place. Disposition for us is mostly selling on market with realtors, which has been useful because you find a really good realtor and then they can be your second set of eyes on the acquisition side too, because they know they're going to get the listing. It's kind of a high level overview of how I go through the business and how anyone can.
So you touched on a few things there, Dan, that really stood out to me. And the first one is that essentially what you said, this is a different animal. Everybody looks at real estate investing with a single lens, look and say, okay, well, this, and primarily that lens is developed off single family residential. And when you start getting into different aspects on the residential, coming through to commercial, and land is typically considered to be a commercial, depending upon the volume, it's a single residential lot. Okay, it's residential, but if it's a large portion acreage or something that could be developed, then it's considered to be commercial. But you got to have a different lens for it when it gets to dirt alone.
Yep.
You got to look at it differently. You don't, the same rules, if you don't apply, you hit a number of things in there that differ. For our listeners, this is important. You need to understand that it's not the same animal. It's not the same beast. When we're talking about investing and looking at residential properties, those processes, numbers, and all those things, and the outcomes are going to be far different than what you're going to see over here. It's going to be different. You mentioned property hacking, and essentially what you're doing here to an extent is something similar to that. But you also sometimes are able to position some seller finance deals?
Yeah, absolutely. And whether you're selling for cash or selling on terms or building spec houses, it needs to align with whatever your goal is. If you want a big pool of annuities, in effect, they become really annuities paying you every month, then selling on terms is a great way to create that. I have gone more the route of selling for cash because I more just look at front range land as a way to increase my capital to invest, buy and holds. But I have friends doing it all via seller financing, and you can end up with the 50, 100 grand in notes coming in every month. So it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But in effect, it's really simple. You can do it traditionally where you go through a title company, they prepare the note and deed of trust, well, depending on the state you're in. The title transfers into the buyer's name, and then you have a lien on the property. So in effect, just like when you buy a property with a mortgage, just the other way around, you're the bank. That's one way to do it. Another way is just contract for deed or land contract. Be careful here. Make sure you're on top of your paying of taxes and any fees and dues because the property stays in your name. But ultimately, what that allows you to do is sell it via a contract where you don't transfer title to their name until they've paid it off completely. Again, make sure your books are up to date, you're tracking this clearly, and you're staying on top of any and all fees or assessments on the lot because it's still in your name. And then you need to know how to properly have a deed prepared and recorded to transfer to their name once paid off. That's another way to go about it. Of course, the first way is more common and more people are going to be okay with that, but then you have to foreclose if they stop paying. Second way, contract for deed. There's a simpler process. You're not going to be able to go through a title company. Every title company I've ever talked to says they will not insure the title and execute the transaction if they aren't actually transferring ownership into the buyer's name.
I bet you that probably differs state to state, depending upon where you are. Check into that with a real estate attorney or title company in the state where you plan to transact. I won't say where you reside. If you're buying properties like you are, Dan, across the country, then obviously that would differ state to state. So you may actually be able to do contract for deed in our state. I do see some contract for deed transactions. So that is very interesting. You kind of touched on a number of things. I appreciate you, again, taking the time out of your busy schedule today to even talk about this. But you also kind of mentioned essentially house hacking and property hacking. Elaborate on that. People look at that from different angles, different perspectives. At the end of the day, it is being creative in acquiring real estate. So talk about that.
Sure. Just to make a clear differentiation here, Front Range Land is an active business for dramatically scaling my income. Now we're moving into the topic of investing, right? Actually buying and holding property over the long term. And so house hacking is a great way to do that, especially when I was just getting started, still working a job. A big reason that I was able to leave my job and get Front Range Land up and going is because I was house hacking. I bought a single family here in Colorado Springs in 2018, and it was a 4-bed, 3-bath split level. I lived upstairs in the master. I rented out the 2 extra bedrooms upstairs for $700 a month each. And then the basement, again, it was a split level. So there was another living room, a back entrance, bathroom, storage, all that, and a basement beyond that. I rented that for $900 a month. So my mortgage was, I want to say 15-ish hundred. And I had, what is that? 1,600 coming in a month while I was living in it. I'm sorry, that math was terrible. I had 2,300 a month.
You said 700 each upstairs. And 900 down.
I forgot the other 700. Yeah. So I had 2,300 a month coming in on a $1,500 mortgage while I was living in the property. They covered my gas, utilities, and food for the month along with the mortgage. And that gave me the freedom to go leave my job, get my business up and running, and fail for a little bit because all my bases were covered. Did I like having people in my house? No, I didn't. I didn't at all. But you know what? I'm glad I did it because it allowed me to get my business going. And I would every year buy another one, move to it, and do it again. That's allowed me to build a portfolio, and it allowed me to take the risk of leaving my job and getting my business going. And so it was uncomfortable. I don't miss that. I stopped doing that last year. I bought a nice house and I don't have anyone in it here with me. But again, short-term sacrifices up front can pay dividends in the long run. And so that was well worth doing. And now I have some great rentals too, just from that.
That is awesome. Because, oftentimes we think about house hacking. We're all over the place. There's scattered thoughts as it relates to it. That's one way to do it. Some people buy property, get it staged up real nicely. They live scarcely, if you will, as far as personalization and all that stuff. And then they short-term rent it maybe on weekends and they travel, they go stay with their parents or with a friend for a week and rent their house out or something of that nature on a short-term basis to make some cash to offset either the expenses. Sometimes they're lucky in certain markets and areas, they're able to completely pack all the way, man. You made money. That's what you did. And that is a wonderful start and a way to get started in real estate investing. And a lot of times, again, you're uncomfortable, pretty positive you're very comfortable now.
That's a great way to say it. There's an analogy I want to make. So I remember when I was 19, I talked to this financial advisor. Ran into him, just small talk at work. And he told me, he goes, the money, this is on average, but the money you invest in your 20s is worth more than all the money you invest the rest of your life on average, because the way compounding works. And so in concept, that really stuck with me. It said, okay, short-term sacrifices right now. If I do this right now, I'm going to set myself ahead for the rest of my life. That was part of what I kept in the back of my mind, that concept in those 4 years where I was renting out the rooms in my house. I didn't like it, but it's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain, as opposed to a lot of people have short-term fun at a young age and then have long-term struggle because they did it in the wrong order. Keeping that top of mind was helpful.
Man, that's a conversation, man, that we could probably carry on forever, because all this stuff is really mindset. It is about shifting the mindset. Dave Ramsey says this thing about living today like no one else, so tomorrow you can live like no one else. And the reality is, if we make the sacrifice early, like you did, and do certain things, then later on in life, in your 30s, which you haven't even gotten there yet, but your 30s and 40s and 50s, man, your life is going to look completely different because you made the initial sacrifice. And oftentimes we, as a people and our listeners, guys, this is a conversation to have at the kitchen table with family, to have with your children, to have with your parents, because we often trickle down a mindset that is contrary to the mindset, Dan, that we're talking about. We trickle down a mindset of consumption, which is, hey, I want to go travel. I want to go do this. I want to do that. Well, you didn't do that. Like you said, your friends had fun while they were in high school and early years in college, but you were doing something that changed the narrative for you. So I'm pretty sure they're in the hustle and bustle right now, trying to figure out a career, what that's going to look like. And you have already gotten your career. You have a business. And for the most part, not saying it's an active business, but I'm pretty sure you're able to work it how you want to work it and have the advantages thereof. Kudos to you for doing so. For our listeners, guys, if any of this aren't able to get today, please come back. But Dan, I don't want to leave today without asking you about, how do you raise capital for this? I may have the money, yeah, great. But if I don't, how do I tap into and get capital for this type of venture?
Sure. Let's start with the front range land, the land and development side of things. For land deals, if you have a good deal, in that context, a good deal is 30 to 50 cents on the dollar. Good deals. There are endless amounts of people that'll finance it. I'll tell you up front, I gave away way too much, not knowing what I was doing, but that's okay. Got the deals done and I learned. I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you get a good deal and there's really a spread and it's somewhere where land is selling, just posting on Facebook, asking around your network, I'm sure you can get it funded. And then beyond that, there's hard money lenders that will finance land deals if it's low enough. I did that a few times with a hard money lender out of Denver. Friends and family, just to reemphasize that, potentially lines of credit. Again, I'm talking if you have no liquid cash. Beyond that, let's say you do want to do the new construction home. Well, again, if you have a good deal where the build cost is well below the actual appraised value of that end product, then a lot of lenders will finance the entire construction as long as you have the land bought outright. Again, maybe you're down in Florida and one of the markets that desperately needs new homes. You can partner with someone to get the land financed and then go to a local hard money lender and get the construction financed. You can do this without a ton of money. I mean, you still need reserves. You need cash to carry the debt service, but you don't need a ton. On the buy and hold side of things, or a big part of the purpose is you're using an owner-occupied loan. And so you're putting 3 to 5% down or 0% down if you're in the military. As far as rentals, you're not going to do with that sort of loan. There are a lot of options. I bought one on 100% seller financing, 3% permanent mortgage. And that's out there. If you find an older seller who owns it free and clear, which there are a ton of right now, those are just a couple options as far as financing beyond just having your own money.
So Dan, I want to make sure I get your contact information out for our listeners. So I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to hit you with what I call a mic drop question. How do people get in contact with you?
Yeah, Dan Habercost on Facebook or Instagram, and just danhabercost.com.
For our listeners, guys, y'all need to reach out to Dan. I'm going to start there. But Dan, I'm going to hit you now with what I call a mic drop question. And unfortunately, you probably still working on that because you are well ahead of the curve. But for a lot of our guests, they're further in. There's this thing, if I'd have known this back then. So if you'd have known something back maybe earlier when you started, that would have completely changed the trajectory and where you are right now, what would that have been?
You can make millions of dollars in any of these niches within real estate. The key is pick one, pursue it intensely, iterate and get better, and just do that over the long term and you will be successful. The biggest thing that people mess up is they try and go in too many different directions at once. They try and do 8 different things. They jump back and forth. You can make as much money as you want. Just pick one thing and get better than everyone else at it.
That was it, man. I love it. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you again taking time out of your busy schedule. We have definitely blown through our time. I cannot thank you enough for the nuggets and jewels that you've shared for our listeners today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. For our listeners, guys, as we quickly wrap up today's show, y'all know what I say. Y'all know how I feel. And we always like to put it this way and always keep it real. And that is, I love you. I love you. I love you. And we're going to see you guys out there in the streets.